Welcome, Dr. Pauline Lloyd.
Thank you, Carol, for that. And so thank you for that introduction. And I've never heard, you write these introductions and you send them off and then you see them printed, but to sit down and hear it read, I'm like, that lady is pretty bad, right? And so all of that kind of thing. And so the way we're going to spend our next hour, and I'll give my talk, and I do have some notes, and then we'll open up for question and answer. Generally when I speak, I have something that's written because it's very scripted, but I have been visiting with Carol and the Mount Holly Quakers for, I don't know, Carol, how long? Maybe at least 3 months, if not longer. Yeah. So I learn wherever I go. And so what I have learned and why I didn't write notes this time is what I have learned from the Quakers is sometimes you just have to let the Spirit speak, right? And so you have to listen and be receptive to not only what is in your spirit, but what the Spirit is saying. And so I really didn't finalize my presentation until last night, right? Because I thought about all of the things that I could have said about 250 years, and we are going to get to that. And then I thought about the things that we are dealing with right now, present day. And I thought about the correlation between what has happened and what is happening, and then the response of the African American, the Quaker community, and this constant fight for freedom. And so that's where we're going. That's how we're going to structure this. I have been engaged just in conversation as we're walking by the displays, in some really unique and interesting conversations about what is and what isn't, about what truth is. And we really need to get, down to like really what truth is, because truth is being distorted. And it is our responsibility to be keepers of that truth. And so with all of that said, let me get to what my notes are, and then we'll get to some questions and answers. And so when I thought about like, what am I going to say and why am I saying this as the great, well, I don't even know how many greats the Black Methodism goes in my family, but I've traced it back to 1874. And so thinking about being in Black Methodism for that long, right, and thinking about the fact that my great-great-grandfather, Adam Harris, enlisted in the Union Army at the signing of the Emancipation Proclamation and was among the 180,000 freed slaves who were given the right to fight for not only their freedom, but America's freedom, right? And I thought about all of that, and then I triangulated the work that I do, the advocacy that I do, and the fact that I have Black Methodism in my family, and now I'm connected with the Quakers, and it's coming full circle. And then I'm doing it here in Burlington County, right, which is a Quaker community, right, founded by the Quakers. And so I wrote down all of my notes, and so let me stick to my notes so I can stay to time. And so Burlington City, 1677, was one of the first settlements here in New Jersey, and that was settled by Quakers. Think about that. Back in 1877, all of what we are experiencing now was settled right in Burlington City by the Quakers. And so moving a little forward to John Woolman, and correct me if I got his name incorrect, and the work that, and I forgot to write down the date that he was born, but he passed in 1720. I had the pleasure of visiting the Woolman House, and if you don't know about that, he was an abolitionist, and people say that he was the precursor, and I will agree with this, and we can agree to continue the conversation and flesh out some of the facts. But before there was a Richard Allen, right, and we'll talk about who he is, there was a John Woolman who advocated, who was for anti-slavery and who was an abolitionist and who took some very strong economic stances about things that he would purchase and things that he would not purchase, and tried to build this economy around anti-slavery, and that was in and he passed in 1720. And if you don't know where his house is, it's still here in Mount Holly. I have the address on the flyer I didn't print, but if you give me your email, I'll make sure I send it to you. But it's right here, beautiful, beautiful space. And when I visited the John Woolman Memorial, it reminded me of home, right? It reminded me of Calvert, Texas, where my ancestors were, because it was a homestead, and there was land for people to roam around, and it just reminded me of the land that my ancestors purchased back in Texas. And so make sure you visit that if you haven't. And then how is the AME connected? John Woolman was not associated with the AME, and I believe that if he had lived a little longer, or if Richard Allen had been born a little earlier, then they would have been connected. And so fast forward to we'll just say 1816 at the founding of the AME denomination. Richard Allen, now history is what it is, and I don't say it's good or bad, I just say it is. And Richard Allen was enslaved by a Quaker, right? And he was enslaved by a Quaker named Benjamin Chew, right? And he was eventually sold to Stokely Sturgis, and I think that was his last transition from being enslaved. Richard Allen being enslaved by Sturgis, but Richard Allen is the founder and the founding father of the African Methodist Episcopal Church in 1816. He and Absalom Jones were at St. George's AME Church, which was a mixed congregation where you had the Caucasian folks sitting on the bottom, the black people sitting on top, and they were not allowed to worship the way they wanted to worship. And so they wanted to pray and they wanted to express themselves in a certain way, and they were not allowed to do so. And the first act of civil disobedience, right, was by Richard Allen. And so they broke from the church. Richard Allen formed the AME, the African Methodist Episcopal. Well, actually they formed it together, and Absalom Jones eventually decided that he was going to go to New York and form the AME Zion, but there was this Quaker connection. And so I don't say connections are good or bad, I just say they were. And that was the connection with Richard Allen and the AME and abolitionists. And how many people are familiar with the AME Church? Members of the AME Church? Have family members who are in the AME Church? Yeah. But one of the things about the AME Church is so when I research the history from Richard Allen in 1816 to Warnock, who is a congressman, to Stacey Abrams, who has roots, I think her parents were Methodist preachers, to Bayard Rustin, right? There is not a single act of civil disobedience, a single piece of legislation where the AME has not been involved. So think about that when you think about way more than 250 years. Now, when you're talking about tracing 250 years and trying to get all of that information down, like in 1 hour, you have to kind of truncate and like hit the high points. And so the people that I'm talking about now were either in Burlington County, starting with John Woolman, are loosely associated to Burlington County. Richard Allen, he did all of his advocacy in Philadelphia, and we'll talk about the significance of the proximity and the waterways. Water is really important to Black liberation, Black bondage and Black liberation. We'll talk about that briefly. And so fast forwarding just a little to the Timbuktu, right, settlement. And I think that was settled in 1826 with land that was purchased from the Quakers, right? And so we can talk about, and we had this engagement about the direct or indirect involvement of the Quakers over the period, over years. And again, I don't say that it's good or bad, I just say that it is. And so we had this free settlement, Timbuktu. John Brewer was the Quaker farmer that sold the land to, I think it's West. I haven't met him, and I'm excited that we have all of these legacy families that are here and that are represented today. They'll get the name rights. I have the dates right, and so you can talk to them about that. And so again, when you think about Timbuktu and the settlement that is right in, where is Timbuktu? West Hampton. Thank you. You guys don't have to whisper. Just tell me. You know, I never stand as the sage on the stage. And so it's in West Hampton. And you think about the fact that Harriet Tubman and people like Frederick Douglass and Sojourner Truth kind of traveled and lived in that space. And all of them were associated with either the AME or the AME Zion. And so again, we see that collaboration or that triangulation of the Quaker involvement in ways that Quakers get involved, because you won't see them in a war, right? You want that's just not part of their theos or ethos. But you will see them fighting for justice, right? And so you will see them advocating for peace. And so people like Harriet Tubman, Frederick Douglass, Sojourner Truth were all part of either the AME church or the AME Zion. And somebody is going to ask me, and if you don't ask me what the difference between the AME and the AME Zion is, when we get to question and answer, and we'll talk about that. I want to spend a little time on Sojourner Truth. She was born Isabel Pumphrey, and she was enslaved by John Livingston, who was the president of Queens College. And so she was enslaved by him, and she escaped and went to the north, and she was a part of the AME Zion. And here's a hint. So AME Zion, you're generally going to find in the northern part of the state. AME, you're going to find in the northern part of the region. And then the AME, you're going to find in the southern part of the region. And there's a reason. We'll talk about that. And so Sojourner Truth, formerly enslaved by, what did I say his name was? Adam?
John Livingston.
John Livingston, thank you. And escaped and went to New York. And we know all of her advocacy that she did. Harriet Tubman was part of the AME Zion. Frederick Douglass was part of the AME Zion. And they were also, Sojourner Truth, Harriet Tubman and Frederick Douglass were also associated with the Quakers. They were very influential, and the Quakers supported them tremendously. We were talking earlier about the Emancipation Proclamation, and so the gentleman that I was talking to, let's go back to Frederick Douglass, and we'll talk about that a little also. And then we come to another legacy family, that's James Still. And most of you guys know this history because I'm an implant, right? I'm an immigrant to New Jersey, a native Texan, and I came to New Jersey in 2000 and started learning the history. I originally settled as the great-great-granddaughter of a Civil War veteran. And I think about who I am. And my original settlement was in Burlington County, right? And I left Burlington County, and now I'm back in Burlington County. It's somebody who left the AME and whatever, and now I'm with the Quakers. And I'm like, full circle, like, universe, what are you saying? And we know him as the Black Doctor of the Pine Hills, and the land that he purchased, and where his hospital and the house was, he purchased from the Quakers, right? Because let's go back to 1677. The Quakers started this settlement, and so they owned the land. And I did a brief, just looking this morning, I want to say it could have been, maybe 100 and some odd acres of land that they owned. And so what are you going to do with all of this land? And so they started selling this land to people who were in need, and people who evidently had the same values for peace and abolitionists. So just getting to some, again, my notes. Tubman, we already said that she was a member of Memorial AME Zion. Frederick Douglass was a member of an AME Zion, Sojourner Truth, and we talked about that. And that's all my notes. And I don't know if that's 250 years. So if we go from 1677 to 2025, is that where we are right now? Talking about, I guess that's a lot more than 250 years, and that's like all of my notes. And so I'm going to take this and I'm going to come from behind the lectern, because I'm a teacher, and so I taught public school for a long time, and I hated standing behind the podium because you don't get involved. And so so when I, outside of all of that history, and I said I allowed like what is happening right now and where we are right now to speak to us, and I'm often, and I'll admit, I'm often kind of frustrated with and well, no, let me rephrase that. I'm inspired right now by the possibility, like where we are right now, when we think about the collaboration of enslaved and freed and formerly enslaved and abolitionists and people who were not allowed to get an education. As I was reading Dr. Steele, I think he could have had 3 months of formal education when he was young, and so he was a self-taught botanist and a self-taught physician. And Abraham Lincoln was a self-taught attorney, right? No formal education. And so when I think about all that our ancestors collectively and individually and as a community and as a church, when I think about all that they accomplished, right, for this country, particularly, I mean, during slavery, after slavery, when I think about what they didn't have, and then what they accomplished just by human will and ingenuity, and I think about everything that we have now and what we can do versus what we are doing. And I know it's hard, it's really difficult. And so, and I'm going down that line because this is a call-in. When we think about the fact that we are legacy families who are not so far removed from our ancestors, and we think about the fact that people like Frederick Douglass and Mary McLeod Bethune, and when I first started coming to the Quaker, to this meeting house, if you sit here and look like right behind where you're sitting, it's like a bust of, God, what was her name? I told you, I'll think of, Ida B. Wells. When you if you just look, and it's going to look like Ida B. Wells is sitting here, and you think about all that they endured, and the lack of resources. But all of our HBCUs, guys, were built by formerly enslaved Africans, right? People who had nothing but a dream and a hope and a hammer and a nail, and some wood, and they started all of our standing HBCUs. When we think about Mother Bethel, right? Hammer and the anvil, those are the symbols of the AME and the AME Zion. People who had a hope and a dream, and they had creativity and innovation, even when AI was not around, right? And so they used what they had and they built what they needed. And so here we are in 2005 when we're talking about technologies that are available to us here and now that we can use and create. We're talking about people who are in technology are looking at things that are going to be happening in 2050. And we have reason to be kind of discouraged because now we're called out of our comfort zone and we're called into action. And being called into action requires, I mean, it costs nothing, right? but it requires everything. It requires us to rethink. It requires us to have forums like this where we can remember. And it requires us to come together, to galvanize. And not everybody can do everything. And some people can't do anything, right? But even if you think you can't do anything, you can support, you can pray, you can just find something to do. And if you're anything is, and sometimes just sitting in silence and being quiet and listening, right? And that's why I really enjoy, as a legacy family, someone with the AME, someone who is Black, right? And I say that loosely, and I'll come back and I'll talk about why I say that loosely. And I'm here with the Quakers, right? And I'm home, right? I feel home. And so the call to action, and this is where I'm going to allow for like question, is like, what can we do, right? What can we do? And thinking about where we are now. And before I get to the what can we do, I do want to take a moment right now of just silent reflection for America, silent reflection for who we are as a nation, and the impact and the influence that we have globally, and how we are using that, right? And how we are divided as a nation. I want us to take a little time in silent reflection for James Still, for Timbuktu, for Adam Harris, for Harriet Tubman, for Frederick Douglass, for all of our ancestors, for John Woolman, and for the Quakers, for William Penn, right? And for all of those, for those who settled, the Quakers who settled this space and this land. Just some silent reflection, and think about all that they accomplished. Think about all that they did. And I couldn't have planned that perfectly anymore. I swear I didn't know. And so we think about for whom the bell tolls, and it tolls for all of those who came before us. And there's going to be a point where that bell is going to be tolling for us. But in between now and then, just think about, and you don't have to give an answer now. Just think about, like, what is my response, and what is my responsibility, and in what ways can I get involved, and in what ways can the youth become involved? How can we employ the youth? So I loosely mentioned Bayard Rustin, but I want to circle back to him because this is bringing, I skipped that time and period. So Bayard Rustin, and if for those of you who don't know him, he organized in 2 months, think about that, in 2 months, he organized the March on Washington in 1963. And why do I mention him, and what does he have to do with Quakerism? So his mother she was like me, she had her feet in both the Quaker meeting house in, I want to say, Chester, PA, and she was also involved in the AME. And so she was like, I'm fluid. And those are my words, not hers. But again, the connection between Quakerism, the AME Church, and Black liberation. Interestingly, byDr, you don't hear a lot about him, and he wasn't a prominent speaker because he was also a member of the LGBTQ plus community. And so being a gay black man during that time was just not socially and politically accepted. And so he did all of this work. But if you look closely as King is speaking, you'll see him in the background. And so he, with young people, right, a whole lot of young volunteers, in 2 months, organized 250,000 people, not to mention the televised, like on the march, to march on Washington in 1963. Phenomenal work. And so I think about the ancestors, and that's my call to action. Like, shucks, Pauline, your great-great-grandfather fought in the Civil War. You have had a member of your family in serving this country that I love and that I fought for, and that I served for. I didn't fight, and that my son served since the Civil War. Purple Heart recipients. We're not a Blue Star family, and someone asked me why we aren't, because I'm like, when we fight, we win, and we care about our family, so we're coming home, right? So I'm thankful for this opportunity to just share with you. And I think I have gone from 1677 to 1963 with like some very cursory overview with some detail of the relationship between the African Methodist Episcopal and Episcopal Zion Church, liberation and abolitionism, and the Quaker community. Could this have been done? And I don't even want to go down that road. It could have been done differently. It was done how it was done. And I'm thankful to the Creator for all of the experiences and all of the ways that He has shown Himself to be true to His word. We're standing here as I say, faith being, right? We are here by faith. We are hope living, right? And we, all of us collectively, in ways that we may demonstrate, in ways that we do silently, we are God glorified for the work that we continue to do, for the work that our ancestors have done, for the work that we are inspiring in our children. We are faith being, God glorified, and hope living. So thank you. And you can clap if you want to. But I do want to just open the floor to conversation, to questions. And I know we were having some engaging conversations, but I just want to open the floor up for like dialogue right now. So if anybody has a question, we have Jack here with the mic.
Good morning, my name is Mary Thomas Presley. I'm a resident of Valencia County. My question is, we have a very rich history, and we can talk about the history, we document, we display, but where do we go from here?
That's a really good question. And this is going to be a plug for my organization, if that's okay. Okay, so one of the things that Islay-Walden Education Alliance does, and just a little about why I named the organization Islay-Walden. And so when I was finishing seminary, and I want to say it was 2022, when I graduated, I was given this assignment, and I was so tired of doing assignments. And so go and research this person, and his name was Islay-Walden. Now, Islay-Walden was a formerly enslaved, legally blind scholar and theologian who graduated New Brunswick Theological Seminary in 1879. In 1879, he identified issues of educational access and economic access in formerly the community of formerly enslaved, informally enslaved communities, and he started eliminating those problems. And so I looked at those same problems that he started addressing in 1879 and said, we are still facing those problems in 2022. I'm going to pick up that mantle. And so your question is, where do we go from here? And so if anybody is looking for any ways to get involved, there are so many kinds of activities that Islay-Walden does. One of those is just this, stories of progress, affirmation, and resilience. Telling our children our stories, getting them involved in the history. And that goes back to the mandate that we were given in Deuteronomy 6, where when we are standing up and sitting down and taking our kids to school and putting them on the bus and taking them to soccer, and that's not what the Bible says, and I'm just bringing it back here to 2025 because that's what we do. We are to tell our children those stories. And I don't mean just the black story or the white story or the Republican story or the Democratic story, I don't know, or the whatever. Tell our story, our American story. And our American story is one of unity and resilience. And when we fight together, we win. But when we fight divided, nobody wins. And so SPAR is one of the ways that we can do it. Another one of the things that I'm really hopeful for is collaborating with like-minded organizations and applying for some of these grants to, fund some of the work that we are doing. The film and media industry is wide open. Did you guys know Netflix has in a headquarters not too far from us? I want to say in Monmouth County somewhere, which is a 30-minute drive away.
Yeah, they're building at Fort Monmouth. Yeah.
At Fort Monmouth,
Yeah.
And so think about that. And so New Jersey is now this film state, the new Jersey. And so getting some of those fundings, telling our stories, and not allowing other people to tell our story for us. I didn't mention. Let me go back to my notes. And somebody help me with this. Talking about education. There was the William R. Allen School was, and this is history, I didn't write down the date, excuse me, we can look it up later. The William R. Allen School was founded here in Burlington County by the Quakers to educate enslaved children, right? Because education was really important to them. And one of the best things you can do is make sure that your children are educated. And so get involved in the PTO. I'd say go even further, since we're talking about this collaboration. Look at starting something small here at one of the meeting houses, starting a school and making sure that our children understand that we are better together. And so there are so many things that we can do. Islay-Walden has the platform to do a lot of those. I just need some help, right? And so, but yeah, beyond Islay, right? I think right now with the way technology is being used, whatever you can think of as long as it's ethical, right? Then I think we can create those paths that are not there, that are not already present for us. And so the future is ours, and it's ours. It's just, how are we going to use it? But, and I'll say this, if anybody is looking for ways to get involved, then just talk to me. And I see my friend Audrey walked in, so thank you. Another way that we can get involved, she does these food tours, and she has this little historic piece, and she does adults. We'll talk about that, try to get her to do kids. And I can understand because of that. But and collaborate and just get to know each other, right? And so Another one of the platforms that I've started is Freedom's Well. And so a little history, everything that I do seems to have this historic context. And so Freedom's Well, so if you're not familiar, how many people know who Josiah Henson is? Ever heard of Josiah Henson? How many people have heard of Uncle Tom? Uncle Tom. So did you know that Uncle Tom, that Josiah Henson and Uncle Tom, that there's this relationship between them? So when Harriet Beecher Stowe wrote Uncle Tom's Cabin, it was actually based off of a real life person named Josiah Henson. And if you read the story and don't listen to everything that people are telling you, Josiah Henson ultimately was supposed to be a Jesus character, right? Because he was in the situation, saw that, okay, maybe what I'm saying is not specifically right, and he sacrificed his life for his people, right? And that is the story, Harriet Beecher Stowe, Uncle Tom's Cabin in a nutshell. I've actually visited the real Uncle Tom, Josiah Henson. I visited his cabin. It's in Dresden, Ontario, Canada. He was an AME preacher. And I want to say he was somehow involved with the Quakers. Oh, I ran from the AME for a long time. I was like, you can search all over, can't find nobody. That was me searching, trying to get away from the AME church and trying to get away from this call. And no matter where I went as far as Uncle Tom's Cabin and Dresden, Canada, and ran across the Quakers in the AME. I was like, okay, Lord, I'm coming home. I'm coming home. But Uncle Tom, so Josiah Henson is the character off of whom Uncle Tom Cabin was based. But Josiah Henson, how many people know who the first person was who went to the North Pole? That was Uncle Tom's nephew. Right? That was Josiah Henson's nephew. And so when you think about this history, that Marvin Gaye has this song, heard it through the grapevine, believe half of what you see and none of what you hear. And what can we do? Start reading primary source documents, start talking to each other. And I'm not going to say put down all your social media, because that's not going to happen, because sometimes I just get up in the morning and I'm like, I don't want to, and I scroll and see what's going on. But start reading and teaching our children to read and sharing these stories. And so I don't know where I was going with that, but I just shared something with you guys about Josiah Henson, who was a real life person and who was phenomenal. And so the next time somebody is said, oh, and before Harriet Tubman started freeing slaves, when Josiah, Freedom's Well, that's where I was going, but I'm going to come back to Freedom's Well. Before Harriet Tubman started her abolitionist movement, Josiah Henson preceded Harriet Tubman, right? And so with the aid of, I don't know which church, but I know with the aid of some Quakers, Josiah Henson made his way to, he freed himself, made his way to Ohio, was aided by someone on a boat. And so they carried him as far as they could. And they said to Josiah, when you get to the other side, when you get on land, you're going to be a free man. And Josiah Henson turned around and said, thank you, sir, and I will use my freedom well. And so that's why I named my podcast Freedom's Well. And that's a question, like, how are we going to use our freedoms? And and this is not a call to arms and all of that kind of stuff, because nobody wants to fight, right? Nobody wins when we fight, and nobody especially wins when we fight each other. And so in what ways can we be creative, and how can we use our freedom? So, yes, and I hope I answered your question, whoever asked. Yes.
Good morning. Thank you for your presentation. My name is Lloyd, and I'm a resident of Burlington County. I also teach African American Studies, the Advanced Placement course over at BCIT. And I heard you express that working with young people is really critical, and I totally agree. I guess my question for you is, how would you encourage students, high schoolers, who are trying to find their way in the world and envisioning their future, to learn more about their story and their ancestors' story? Because I think there's been a reluctance in education to even approach that topic for a lot of reasons. So how can I do that with my students in a way that would be, thoughtful and meaningful and impactful for them as they think about what they're going to do with their freedom?
Right. And so that's a really good question. So during the ethics and equity, and so to answer your question, because I go off on a tangent, but to answer your question, call me, get involved with organizations like mine, get involved with the Woolman Center, and he does this phenomenal presentation. And I think he's limited because of the space of the house. He may be limited to how many people can go in at one time, but it's a phenomenal presentation that he does. Get involved with organizations like the Timbuktu, get involved with the Steele family, and so invite us in. So go and so each of us are here, so make sure you get our cards and we will reach out to you. And well, I can speak for myself. I definitely will reach out to you, because I'm looking for a pathway to get back into the classroom without actually going back to work full time. Because that's the part of my freedom that I'm going to use in a different kind of way, and hopefully I will use it well. So one of the things that I discovered during the Ethics and Equity Conference, and I published, not on like ISBN published, but I created a toolkit. It's called Common Sense, Common Cause, Uncommon Resolve. And you would be surprised at you wouldn't, because you're in it, the New Jersey legislation that's telling us what we can and cannot do and cannot in the classroom, and what we can teach. And part of that toolkit, and I can share that with you, is telling exactly what the bill is, whether it's an assembly bill or someplace in the Senate, who sponsored it, what it's saying, and whether it's passed or not. But you'd be surprised what the state of New Jersey is saying about what teachers can and cannot do or cannot say when it comes down to teaching American history. And so I don't do Black history, because American history is Black history. Quaker history, American history is Native American history. American history is European history. And so there's no separating that. And so when you try to parse it out and not teach history the way it is, because it may be a little inconvenient, right? But ultimately, I think what teachers like you could do is get involved with organizations like mine, and let's figure out how we can partner together, because you're limited in what you can do in the classroom, unfortunately. So yes. Other questions, comment? Yes.
The difference between the AME and the AME.
Okay, so I'm going to say Absalom Jones and Richard Allen did not put their differences on Facebook. And so AME, and so when they formed this, and I want to say it was called the Free Society or the Freedom Society, and they decided that they were going to leave St. George Methodist, Episcopal Methodist Church, and they were going to form the African Methodist Episcopal Church. They did that together. Absalom Jones wanted to stay liturgically connected to the to St. James Methodist Church, and so he left Philadelphia, went to New York, and started the AME Zion. The main difference is the AME Church is the only congregation that has been consistently governed at the top by someone of the African diaspora. And so in policy and governance and polity, they are the same. The AME Zion, in order to be a bishop, and there's a process in the AME Zion, the bishop can be either black or white or whatever, but in the AME, there has never been anyone outside of the African diaspora holding any clergy positions. And that was the main difference between the AME and the AME Zion. Other questions?
Was there anything that surprised you in your research about Quakers? Maybe you already answered that.
So I don't get surprised by much, right? Because particularly as it comes to history. When I was finishing my dissertation, I just said, let the data speak. And so whatever the data and the information tells me is what, you know, I just look at the facts for what they are. But the one thing that inspired me, however, and the reason that I continue to be a part of the Quaker community, and is because they more than anyone, even with the AME and St. George's, John Wesley and everything that he did, they were not staunch abolitionists, and so there was no push in St. George and any of these other non-melanated denominations to educate black children, right? And so things don't surprise me, inspired and hopeful. That was one of the things, how they were always, in ways that they could, supportive of anti-slave and black liberation and black empowerment. Now, if I made to the Quakers, making a decision within the Quaker community takes, yeah, and so things, yeah. So I'll just say, but I enjoy that process because everyone is heard, right? And opinions and things, and there is a consensus. And so when they move, they're moving in a direction and they're moving together, right? So yeah. So nothing surprised, but just really inspired. Other?
Yes, ma'am.
Would you like to talk about water? I'm really curious.
Talk about water.
The meaning of water.
Yeah, so water is really interesting, and so water has a spiritual connection. We were people of the water. You had communities where we lived off the water. Water provided us with food. It provided us with protection, right? And so when our ancestors, when our black ancestors were removed from Africa across the Atlantic to the colonies, right? And we got out, we really thought that we were back home. And so water moved us here. Water was also a form of resistance, right? Because not everybody, they were chained together, and some people would have rather suicided than to be enslaved. And so they would jump together, particularly folks from, and I think when I did my research, I'm from the Dahomey tribe, the region in Benin, and so they would jump together. Water was also this disposal. Like, what are you going to do? You're in this ocean with dead bodies. You just throw them in the sea. And so we have this real relationship with water. There are communities in Africa who use the water as protection because you couldn't get to, they were not land people, they were water people, and so they built communities and schools and houses and markets on the water, so people would leave them alone. And so we had that connection with water. And so when you come to the colonies, we were not allowed like to swim and to be a part of the water. And so, which is why, you know, swimming and a lot of African American communities, we're challenged with swimming. I taught my kids how to swim. I made sure they learned how to swim, but I was not, water was something to be feared because it just was. Water was also protection. When people were escaping, you would have to cross these waterways, and water was a way sometimes to hide your scent, along with other things. They say hush puppies and peppers, and so water has been a really instrumental and important part to us as African Americans. And then when you think about it from a spiritual point of view, I think it was Moses who struck the rock, and he was supposed to tap it, and he struck it, and like water was everywhere. When Jesus was crucified, they pierced him in his side, and blood and water came out, and so there's a spiritual connection to water. But we kind of shy away, and I'll just speak for my family. We kind of shy away from water because water was both protection, water was both a danger. And it was hard for us to decide which one, so we kind of shy away from water. Yes, ma'am.
So water gives life and it takes life.
Yes, water it gives life, and it has the capacity to take life. Yes.
But it also can cure, which is a shame because. So, for example, I'm just thinking of something. If a person of color needed to go for water therapy, say, to help with arthritis or some kind of condition that they had, would they be reluctant to do that as well? Because water has that healing property.
So I
wanted to respond to that. The experience of her family is not the experience of my family. She can't answer for a lot of things at all. It's an individual. My father was a swimmer and diver, well known in South Jersey.
Okay.
He formed swim teams and influenced children in Camden, New Jersey in the 1930s, 1940s.
So that's
And water is very important. I will say that I love to live in states that are near the ocean, coastal. If I go into states that are landlocked in the United States, I feel strange. If there isn't water nearby, to me, water is life. It is a means of escape. It is a means of pleasure. And so for me, it's very much, and going on rivers, land,
healing.
And also my maternal grandfather was born in Barbados, so that's an island.
Right.
So we have diverse experiences and relationships with everything.
Well, thank you for clarifying.
And we're not but if it's medicinal, yeah, I would do water therapy. Am I going to go and swim in the Atlantic? No. And so when we're talking about water, we're not talking about and again, and I appreciate the articulating that our experience as people from the African diaspora is not monolithic. And we have a shared history, we have a shared heritage, but our experiences are as different and as vast as the 19 different, and ask me why I know that there are 19 different shades of black. When I brought in Robert Chelsea, who was the world's oldest and only African-American full face transplant recipient, just think about that. He was burned severely, had a face transplant, and the doctors had a difficult time matching the skin tone because there were 19 different shades of black they discovered. And so our experiences are as different and as vast and as beautiful as all of that. Yeah. There's diversity within the experience. Yes, there is.
Yeah.
And maybe what she's saying, maybe we would get an order, we just wouldn't get in that 10-foot.
Right, yeah.
We would get an order, just maybe not a 10-foot, a 4-foot, especially for therapy.
Yeah.
Not overhead.
No. Here, fine. If the waves come, then I'm backing up. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
You speak a lot about the African American, the AME Church and AME Zion. In 2025, with all the challenges that are going on, where is the church role, and where can they be between it?
We are the church, right? So I was talking, I don't know, Carol, if it was you I was talking to, or if it was Mimi, and I told them that, I had something that I thought was going to be scripted, and I was going to get up and just talk and then, do the typical thing, but I was not allowed to do that. I didn't prepare my notes. I finalized my notes this morning at 8 o'clock, and I said I need to get there because this starts at 9 and I need to give myself time to set up. But we are the church. Just as America has kind of lost its way, right? There are so many things that have pulled us away from our traditions and even the advocacy that we are doing here. So many things have pulled us away. And it's our responsibility as representatives of creation, of the Creator, irrespective of those things that would otherwise divide us. It is our responsibility to be representatives of creation, to give back to the earth, to get as much as the earth has given to us, to give back to each other and to love each other the way that we know that we need to love each other. Can we blame it or point to say that the AME Church could do more? Can we say the Baptist Church can do more? Can we say that the Episcopalian, the Presbyterian, can we say that any can do more? And I say yes. So during my early morning, let's not get out of the bed, let's look at Facebook a little. I saw the most amazing thing happening at the Vatican. Oh God, what is his name? No, that's the Pope. Chrissy's husband. John Legend. John Legend and some rapper, they were at the Vatican. The first time that the Pope has let someone. It could have been Chance the Rapper. It could have been John. Yeah, but they were at the Vatican rapping, being Richard Allen, expressing themselves musically at the Vatican, right? And it was phenomenal. When you think about other denominations that doesn't have such a hierarchy of governance, like the United Church of Christ, which is where I'm being ordained, that gives me the liberty to say what I'm saying without the bishop saying, well, Pauline, what did you just say? That I'm using my freedom well. And so churches are a function of the people within the church, right? And so if organizations kind of use their freedom in ways that are liberative, not only to society, but to your soul. The last time I went into this one particular denomination, I was literally soul sick for 3 days. I mean, depressed, couldn't stop crying. And I just asked myself, why do you keep going back? And so instead of talking, and instead of saying, where is the church? I'm going to say, we are the church. And if there's something going on and that we want to see better, what are the processes and who are the people that we can talk to implement some of these things and to make sure that we have programming that is representative of what we want to do. Yeah, and do that without fear. So another thing about the Black church is that, and I think this can be church in general, as I start to visit synagogues, and so one of my friends is a rabbi, and I visit him like once a month on Fridays, and I visit mosques, and I have visited Hindu temples. We have to be people of faith without fear. And so generally and our hope cannot only be in heaven, right? Because, and I say this all the time, if the end state of salvation was dying and going to heaven, as soon as we confessed and believed, that should have been it. There's a whole lot of stuff for us as individuals to do here and now, saved or not, from what are you saved, that we can do now. If we want to call it a church, we can call it a church. If we want to call it freedom, we can call it freedom. But the churches are a function of the people within the church, and then the function of that church ultimately is of that leadership. And so just talk to some of our church leaders and say, pastor, bishop, elder, let's think about doing this or doing that, and do it without fear. And there's one last thing that my brother and I are going to continue to talk here. We were having this conversation about the Emancipation Proclamation. How many people have read it? You've read the Emancipation Proclamation? Kind of cursory. So I started giving that as gifts to people in leadership, to people who were talking about getting involved in American liberation. Because the Emancipation Proclamation, the Civil War, and it liberated the enslaved and the free, right? Because in order for me to keep someone in bondage, and that means that my soul has to be in bondage also, I'm perpetually tied to that person. Somebody accused me of kidnapping. I'm like, I don't want to kidnap anybody. That's a responsibility. I have to feed you and house you. I'm like, I would never do that. Go on about your business. But when you're involved in that it is a relationship, and it's a relationship from birth or until or whenever that relationship starts, until that person, one of the other person, passes away. And so being tethered to someone like that also tethers you, and so you don't want to do that. And I forgot where I was going with this, and I do that quite often, and that's why I say write this down. I would do that when I was teaching all the time anyway. But the Emancipation Proclamation. So as a native daughter of Texas and the great granddaughter of a Civil War veteran, I made sure that I read and I understood what I was reading. And so when you read it carefully, there were parishes and some states that were not part of the Union, and people there were enslaved. And so there are very specific regions and parishes within the states and within Louisiana, where it said these enslaved people are no longer enslaved. The Emancipation Proclamation was a military directive. And so it said they were going to be free. Frederick Douglass was very involved in the last iteration, and I want to say there were 2, maybe 3 iterations, but the last iteration of the Emancipation Proclamation gave black men in these parishes and in these states that were had ceded from the Union, it gave them the right to fight. Very specific things it told them to do and not to do. You are free. The war is still going on because it was 1863 when it was signed. You are free. Don't get involved in violence and all of this kind of stuff, because and I think that was a wise thing to say, because if all of a sudden you're free and you start fighting and you don't have the ability to win, like, you're gonna die anyway, so just don't do that. Don't leave, because we're in the middle of a civil war and there's no safe place for you to go. Even today, and I can say this as the former Command Sergeant Major of one of the battalions under the 200 Military Police Command, we still don't have any directive for displaced citizens. And so if you're a displaced citizen and you're free and you're like, don't come to the military installation, because now we have to feed you and clothe. We're not doing that. So stay where you are, continue to work, demand pay. And then if you are able-bodied, we need you in the military and we need you to fight. And it was 180,000 freed black men, and there were spies and things all along the way, who enlisted, and that is the essence of the Emancipation Proclamation. And so did it free the enslaved in certain regions? It did, and it gave them the right to fight. Frederick Douglass was adamant about us being involved in our own liberation. His sons fought. His sons enlisted in the Civil War, in the Union Army, and they fought in the Civil War. And so and I don't like to get into, arguments about what it did and what it didn't and all of that, because I like, to what end? I'm going to be right, you're going to be wrong, I'm going to be wrong, you're going to be right, and we're going to go off, feeling some way about each other. But ultimately, we are all, yes, thank you. We're all in this quest for freedom. And again, if you look at Quakerism, if you look at Black liberation, if you look at the AME Church and even the AME Zion, you are going to see this triangulation where they were tethered together for peace and justice. So, thank you.